International News Edition. France's Prime Minister calls for international aid to Jordan to help it deal with the influx of refugees. European foreign ministers call for an immediate end to Russian attacks in Syria, saying Moscow's intervention risks prolonging the war. And Turkey says Daesh militant group is the prime suspect in the suicide bombings that killed at least 97 people in the Turkish capital. Good evening and very warm welcome to the news. His Royal Highness Prince Faisal the Regent briefed a U.S. Senate delegation about Jordan's support of regional and international efforts to fight terrorism and extremism. He told the Royal Court meeting with a team led by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell that Jordan is supporting efforts to find political solutions to current crises in the Middle East to enhance global peace and security. The meeting tackled the burdens Jordan bears in hosting a large number of Syrian refugees and prospects of increasing international support to the kingdom to cope with the refugee influx. McConnell pointed to Jordan's pivotal role in addressing various regional issues and noted His Majesty the King's relentless efforts to bring about peace and security in the region. Foreign Minister Nasser Judah also discussed with the Senate members the strategic partnership between Jordan and the U.S., as well as political developments in the region. Judah reviewed the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories and the ongoing Israeli assaults against the Palestinians. He said Israeli violations should stop immediately, as its actions would undermine the prospects of achieving peace. French Prime Minister Manuel Valls urged the international community to increase aid to help Jordan cope with the economic burden of absorbing waves of refugees. During a visit to the Latin Church in Marca, where displaced Iraqi families had taken sanctuary, the French Prime Minister appealed to the international community not to leave Jordan alone in shouldering the burden of refugees. He said the kingdom's limited resources were not enough to absorb such a large number of refugees and migrants. Valls met with Iraqi Christian families being looked after by the Latin Church. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour chaired a meeting of the Higher Council of Civil Defence to discuss preparations by government agencies to deal with the winter season. Mansour urged the public and concerned authorities to take all the necessary measures to address such situations as severe weather, particularly in most affected areas. The Prime Minister said the National Centre for Security and Crisis Management has the key role of organising government work related to bad weather or dealing with other incidents. He also stressed close cooperation between the Army and security forces, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and municipalities across the country to assign the responsibilities and duties of each authority. Over to the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces shot and killed 2 Palestinians, whom they said had stabbed 2 Israelis in a Jewish settlement in occupied East Jerusalem. Israeli police said the 2 young Palestinians had carried out the stabbings that injured 2 settlers, one of them critically, in Pisgat Ze'ev settlement on the northern edge of Jerusalem. The incident came amid tensions that continue to escalate across the West Bank following the killing of 24 Palestinians and the injury of over 1,300 by Israeli fire this month. Israeli occupation forces arrested 50 Palestinians during raids in various West Bank cities. The Palestinian Prisoners Club said the Israeli soldiers raided the cities of Hebron, Bethlehem and Tulkarem, in addition to a number of neighborhoods of occupied East Jerusalem, and arrested the suspected anti-Israeli activists. European foreign ministers called for an immediate end to Russian attacks on Syrian opposition groups. They said Moscow's intervention risks prolonging the war. At a meeting in Luxembourg, the bloc will seek to find a common position on the role that Syria's President Bashar al-Assad should play in the solution of the Syria crisis. Russian aircraft carried out more sorties, hitting targets in a number of locations across Syria. This report has more.
The Syrian conflict is high on the agenda as European Union foreign ministers gathered in Luxembourg for talks. The bloc is divided over the future role of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. France is keen to see Assad go as soon as possible, while Germany would prefer to have him involved in the transitional phase before he quits. Despite the worsening situation on the field, the Syrian issue is so divisive that EU ministers have for many months refrained from adopting common conclusions, with hardliners preferring him to be referred to the International Criminal Court, while a softer option would be a voluntary exile in Russia. The irregular meeting of the 28 foreign ministers is the first since Russia began an aerial campaign on Syria that it says is aimed at Daesh militants. The Chinese foreign minister said while meeting a top aide to Syria's president that Beijing supports Syria in safeguarding its sovereignty and territorial integrity and opposes easy interference in other countries' internal affairs. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said there's clear progress in finding a united approach with the US-led coalition in combating Daesh in Syria.
We still do not 100% share the same view on the situation up to every step with our partners in the region, with the Americans, with our other colleagues, but we absolutely have progress.
In the past 24 hours, Russian military airplanes had carried out 55 sorties in Syria, hitting targets in Idlib and Latakia regions and a target near Tertiana. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, Russian jets also carried out at least 30 airstrikes on the town of Kafr Nabuda in Hama province, and hundreds of shells hit the area as the Syrian army and Hezbollah fighters seized part of it. Kafr Nabuda's capture would bring government forces closer to insurgent-held positions along the main highway that links Syria's main cities. The 4-year-old Syrian conflict, which has killed more than 250,000 people, has become a key issue in Europe again in recent months, as hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing the conflict have entered the bloc seeking asylum. The UN Refugee Agency chief questioned the EU's strategy of building more camps in Turkey to stem the flow of refugees into Europe, saying it would be more effective if host countries allowed refugees to work.
That we need to increase substantially the forms of people being able to come to Europe legally. And these can be done through resettlement from the neighboring countries of the refugee-producing ones, or humanitarian admission, or through visas given to people with a flexible approach, or through enhanced family reunification programs.
The UNHCR says more than 3,000 have died this year trying to cross from Turkey. Several thousand more have drowned in the Mediterranean trying to reach Italy from North Africa. Luay Balkar for the news at 10.
An Egyptian court ruled that former President Hosni Mubarak's 2 sons could be released from prison. Ala and Jamal Mubarak are awaiting an appeal for a case involving the theft of state funds. The case concerns charges that Mubarak and his sons embezzled millions of dollars of state funds using money intended to upgrade presidential palaces to renovate private family residences instead. Ala and Jamal Mubarak were sentenced to 3 years in prison last May, along with their father, who was toppled in a popular uprising in 2011 and now resides in a Cairo military hospital. The court ruled today that the Mubarak sons had already served their required time in prison for the sentence while awaiting the appeal process, which is still underway. Turkey's government said Daesh is the prime suspect in the suicide bombings that killed at least 97 people in the Turkish capital, Ankara. But opponents vented their anger at President Recep Tayyip Erdogan at funerals, universities and courthouses. Here's more.
Thousands gathered in the Turkish city of Tunceli and the town of Suruc for the funerals of several victims of terror bombings. Those coffins being carried for burial were 4 victims of the twin bomb attacks in the capital Ankara that left at least 97 people dead. Relatives, friends held the caskets of Mesut Mak and Adil Gorosh, members of the Turkish Communist Labour Party, who were killed in last Saturday's bombings, which took place during a peace rally by pro-Kurdish and leftist activists. Thousands crowded around the mourners, holding party flags and chanting anti-government slogans as the coffins were carried through the streets of the city. Speaking in a live interview, Prime Minister Ahmed Davutoglu said Daesh is the focus of investigations into the twin suicide bombings. He said investigators are close to identifying one of the suspects. The father of 3 men wounded in the blasts said one of his sons had described seeing one of the bombers carrying a bag on his back and one in his hand, and called out "stop" before the bomb detonated. A local newspaper cited police sources as saying the type of explosives and the choice of target pointed to a group within Daesh known as Adıyaman Ones, a reference to Adıyaman province in southeastern Turkey. Davutoglu added that Saturday's attack was an attempt to influence the outcome of a parliamentary election on November the 1st. Officials say there is no question of postponing the vote. Davutoglu has earlier declared 3 days of national mourning after the attack. In the deadliest attack on Turkish soil, 2 bombs struck seconds apart, targeting a rally of pro-Kurdish activists and civic groups near Ankara's main train station. There was no claim of responsibility for the attack, which comes as external threats mount for NATO member Turkey, with increased fighting across its border with Syria and incursions by Russian warplanes on its airspace over the last week. Hiba Al-Atoum for the news at 10.
5 members of NATO's international support mission in Afghanistan were killed and 5 injured when a British military helicopter crashed in the capital, Kabul. NATO's Resolute Support Mission said in a statement that 2 British and 2 US service members and 1 French contracted civilians were killed as a result of the crash at its headquarters in Kabul. Britain's Ministry of Defence said 2 Royal Air Force personnel had been killed when a British helicopter crashed while landing at the base. It added the incident, described as non-hostile, is being investigated. British-born economist Angus Deaton's analysis of consumption, poverty and welfare has won him the 2015 Economics Nobel Prize. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences said that Deaton's work had been a major influence on policy making, helping to determine which social groups are affected by an increase of value-added tax on food. The Academy noted that Deaton also spearheaded the use of household survey data in developing countries, especially data on consumption, to measure living standards and poverty. Committee member Mats Persson said Deaton's work was significant in many ways.
They decided to award the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Science.
His research spans a large field, but it's all united in the common theme, consumption, and consumption is important in both practical and theoretical respects.
It's formal now. Singapore launched the testing of driverless vehicles on public roads as of today. With a limited land and workforce, the country is hoping to use autonomous vehicles to encourage residents to use more public transport. The cars are converted Mitsubishi electric vehicles with a top speed of 30 kilometers per hour. It's fitted with motors for the steering wheel, the brakes and the gas pedal. For security purposes, a person still needs to sit behind the steering wheel in case anything goes wrong.
We'll accept the ignition. Okay.
Now let's take you to the Philippines, where perhaps the youngest cheerleader ever has become an internet sensation. 2-year-old toddler She Garcia can hold her balance for several seconds on her father's hand, lift her legs in the air and do a Superman pose with both of her arms stretched out. On Facebook, a single post of her performing A cheerleading routine received more than 29,000 views and 433 shares. Her acrobatic stunts have earned her fame. She has been featured on national television and was invited by local politicians to perform at various events.
Superman.
FIFA's Ethics Committee decided to suspend former FIFA Executive Committee member Warawi Makudi for 90 days, pending a full investigation. Makudi, who currently heads the Thai Football Association, was on the committee in December 2010 when it voted to award the 2018 World Cup to Russia and the 2022 tournament to Qatar. Last week, South Korean Chung Mong-joon, who also sat on the executive committee in 2010, was banned for 6 years, while Jack Warner, another member of the committee at the time, was banned for life. To Euro 2016 qualifiers, the Netherlands squad added Southampton goalkeeper Maarten Stekelenburg for their final qualifier against the Czech Republic due tomorrow. Currently fourth in Group A, the Netherlands face elimination. The last time the Dutch failed to qualify for a major tournament was the 2002 World Cup. Despite beating Kazakhstan, their fate is not in their own hands. They need to beat the Czech Republic and hope Turkey, 2 points ahead of the Dutch, do not beat group leaders Iceland if they are to make it to the playoffs. Now, a look at the weather forecast. Fair across much of the country tonight, with lows not exceeding the 20-degree mark in the hilly areas. As for tomorrow, moderate weather is forecast for many regions, but it will remain hot across the Jordan Valley. The Dead Sea should expect a high of 37 degrees. It will be hot in Aqaba as well, with northerly fresh winds and calm seas. Now, look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. To close our top stories once again. France's Prime Minister calls for international aid to Jordan to help it deal with the influx of refugees. European foreign ministers call for an immediate end to Russian attacks in Syria, saying Moscow's intervention risks prolonging the war. And Turkey says Daesh militant group is the prime suspect in suicide bombings that killed at least 97 people in Ankara. And that's the end of tonight's news. My name is Raed Laplouche. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good night.